It's that time once again, folks. It's time for the Phil Taylor Jones Show, and I'm your host, Phil Taylor Jones, and we're going to go on a bit of a journey of history today. And this is on the heels of my hearing something that I really didn't want to hear, and that's that Airbus industry, the ones who make the largest airliner in the world, the A380, have taken root right here in the good old US of A. Yep, they're building those airplanes here now. And it really got on my nerves and up my nose because, this is what the news is saying, I'm not saying this. Well, how do you feel being on what's historically been known as Boeing Country or Boeing territory? And they went on to say that they wanted to build a plant here so that they could be near their customers and all of this crapola. Well, to that I say, bull baloney. I heard, I guess back in 2010, 2011, that they were most desirous of getting an A380 in the Air Force fleet as Air Force One. And I didn't hear any more about it, but that doesn't mean that they weren't still thinking it. To be able to carry the world's most important person, and that's the President of the United States, is quite an honor and quite prestigious. And that has been the honor and the prestige of American aircraft builders over the years. Just a little quick thing I'd like to read to you. It says a number of aircraft types have been used as Air Force One since the creation of the presidential fleet, starting with two Lockheed Constellations in the late 50s. They were designated Columbine 1 and Columbine 3. It has also included two Boeing 707s introduced in the early 1960s and 70s, respectively. Since 1990, the presidential fleet has consisted of two Boeing VC-25s, which are specifically configured, highly customized Boeing 747-200s, 200 series aircraft, and the Air Force plans to procure a 747-8 to be the next Air Force One. Now, while it's true that the current plane that the president flies in, oh bastard, it's getting up there in age. And when I say in age, you might say, well, Phil, they fly old vintage aircraft all the time. Well, this is true. But for an airplane of this size, you don't want to take anything for granted. Things like metal fatigue and that sort of thing. So instead of trying to refurbish, which the Air Force does an impeccable job on this aircraft or any aircraft that are in the presidential fleet, they do an impeccable job. I mean, every time you see this aircraft, it's shiny and it looks like it's brand new, and it's just a graceful, beautiful aircraft to see on the ground or in the air. They do an impeccable job, but that still doesn't take away the fact that it has over the years suffered metal fatigue. So to not take any chances with the leader of the nation, they replace them so often. And the one that he's in currently is a 747-200. Well, now we have 747-800. So you can see the progression of the aircraft itself over the years. Now, as I said before, this is what they are aspiring to. This is the beautiful 747-8. It's a gorgeous aircraft. Just to see this plane on the ground or in the air, even though I've been around aviation, I've been flying airplanes since I was 11 years old. I started out in sailplanes. To see this airplane anywhere, if I you know, if I see one in the sky, it sends chills up and down my spine. I mean, it really does. I get excited about this plane. I get excited about this company. Boeing, you know, has been there, and as the saying goes, if it ain't Boeing, I ain't going. You know, so this is what the Air Force is considering. Now, systematically, when you look at these foreigners, I don't care what light you put them in, they're always looking for an opportunity to bulldoze their way into the American fabric. Look at what Toyota did. They bulldozed their way into NASCAR. That's kind of when I stopped watching NASCAR so much, because to me, to look at NASCAR, you think about people like A.J. Foyt, Tom Petty, Dale Earnhardt Sr. and Jr., you know, so many greats. They drove Fords, Chevys, Dodges. Toyota is a Japanese car. I don't care if they do make them here. It's a Japanese car. And in my opinion, does have no right being in NASCAR. But they bulldoze their way in. And that's what these foreigners are really good at. They're good at bulldozing. I don't know why they don't make bulldozers. I'm trying to cut in on John Deere and Caterpillar, not John Deere, Caterpillar. Those are to make the big bulldozers, you know, and Bobcat. Okay, so here's the deal. Airbus knew that, well, they might have a hard sell if they're still making airplanes over in France and where they make them overseas, across the pond. So what do? They kind of needle nose their way in, bulldoze their way into America, start making them here. Because I guarantee you they want to throw their bid in, even though the Air Force is looking to Boeing. But I think they want to bulldoze their nose in here. Now, while this isn't the passenger version of the A380, it still gives you a pretty good representation of, you know, what it is. It's a very big airplane, you know. It's huge. It's, as I said before, the largest airliner in the world. Not the largest airplane, but the largest airliner. The Russians have that, you know, honor of having the largest airplane. So you got double decks, you know, there's two decks, and it's a big airplane. Now, why would the president need something this huge is beyond me. But I think this is what they're trying to do. They now start building these planes in America, and at least they have a plant here. They're building planes. I don't know if they're building this particular model here, but they are building planes. I know the A320, the A330, and I believe the A340. I haven't heard anything about the A380 yet. Maybe they're planning to. But my point is, if they've got their foot on American soil, that probably gives them carte blanche to say, hey, well, we're going to throw our hat in the ring, and maybe the president will be flying in one of our airplanes. These foreigners are getting away with too much, and we're letting them. Toyotas, Hondas, you know, what other one? Nissan are built right here. They don't come from Okinawa, Japan anymore. They come from right here. Places like Smyrna, Tennessee, and you know, places like that. And it's undercutting our American car makers. So now they want to start doing it with the airplanes. What is America thinking? If you want to provide more jobs for people, get companies like Boeing to maybe branch out from Everett, Washington. I'm sure they do in some like manner. They don't build everything up in Everett, Washington, but branch out even more. We implore you. We need to build more, or you know, build our infrastructure of employment and jobs for people. So why don't you put some companies or some factories a little further east? Lockheed Martin, do the same thing. Get the airlines to want to implement some airplanes for shorter routes or short to medium range routes. Get them to build new airplanes. That's why we got the 737. Okay, back in the day when they had the big 707, which was a pretty large airplane in its day. that plane would usually do the big jobs, like going from coast to coast or intercontinental. So they said, well, and then they had the 727. That was the big tri-jet with all the engines in the rear of the aircraft on the fuselage. That was medium range, medium to long. So they needed a little short hopper. So they went to Boeing and said, I think it was United, went to Boeing and said, you know, we need a little short range jet that can just do the little bit, you know, like going from California to Nevada, or maybe from California to Oregon, or from New York to Chicago, or something like that. So they implemented and designed the little twin jet we know as a 737. They call them jelly beans or little fluff, and it's a really cool jet. It's still around today, and it's still doing great things for the carriers that purchase them. So that's how you know, make things better. Why do you have to have these foreign people come over here and infiltrate this country to knock down further what we know as Americana? From, as I said, the early 1943, the president was flown around in American-made airplanes. You know, so why does that have to change? The 747, designated the Queen of the Skies, has been around. It has done its job. I remember flying on this airplane when it first came out back in 1970. Couldn't wait for it to get here. American Airlines was one of the first airlines to get this. They called it the luxury liner. And man, it was. We lived right on the glide path at Detroit's Metropolitan Airport. So, I mean, when the airplanes came over our house, they came so low you could almost see what movie was playing. You know, it was just a majestic airplane to see because it was the largest airliner at that time. In fact, they called it a jumbo jet because when you walk into the cabin of this airplane, instead of the single aisle that, you know, passengers had been so accustomed to seeing, there were now two aisles. So you had like 2 seats to the left of you, 2 seats to the right of you, and 4 seats right in the middle. It was an amazing airplane, and it still is. It has gone through some very interesting changes. The 747-400 had little winglets on the edge of it. They sort of stuck up on the edge like this. As you can see now, the wing flex of this jet not only gives it this amazing look in flight, but because the wings are so long, it uses less gas. This is a very fuel efficient plane, and it's a very fast plane for its size. It's the fastest, and this is of the last information that I've gathered, it's the fastest airliner of its size and type in the world. Beats out the old A380. It's efficient on the ground. The A380 is kind of destructive. They had to go back and redo it. You see, when the airplane lands, to slow it down before the brakes can take, the wheel brakes can take hold, it has a sort of a retrofire, and it sends the jet flow out through the front. If you've ever landed in a jet, you know, and you feel that sort of lunge forward, that's what's happening. And it happens on all 4 engines. If you look at the wing sweep, how deeply these wings are swept, all 4 engines retrofire. On the A380, only the inboards do it. Because these out here, if you notice, this airplane is more stretched out. So these 2 engines are out over the grass that, you know, is adjacent to the runway. And originally, when it did it, it tore up all of the grass. So they had to go back and say, well, we're going to only have the inboard engines do that. I mean, you know, I'm not trying to take away from the A380. It's a cool airplane. The appointments, depending on the airline, I know Lufthansa, Emirates Airlines. Oh boy, you know, they really got theirs laid out and plushed out. But my point is, It's a great airplane, but it does not need to carry the president. We need to have the 747-8 carry the president, as we've had American planes doing that service since 1943, perhaps a little before, and we need to have that proud tradition continue. Let the Airbus carry the Queen of England, or let it carry Frank Holland, or as they call him, Francois Hollande. Let him carry that president. We don't need him carrying the president that we have in this country, even if it is old bastard. So, there once again, we're too foreign washed in this country. We need to start thinking about Americans and Americana and keeping that sacred. Toyotas and NASCAR, now Airbus industry in the United States. We've lost the ball on a lot of things, but to the Air Force, please keep the 747-8 on your order list for the president. We don't need an A380. It's a great and beautiful airplane. It's, majestic too in the skies, but it hasn't designated being the queen of the skies or the king of the skies. That belongs to Boeing's 747. Let's keep it that way, and let's keep transporting our president in this grand and beautiful aircraft. That's our show for today, and we hope you enjoyed it. And as always, we invite you to come along with us on these little journeys that we have. And we thank you so much for once again viewing the Phil Taylor Jones Show. Take care and stay safe.